George Bush Sr. died recently. We're going to ask the question today, is he in heaven or is he in hell? Coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. Yes, indeed, we are going to ask the question, George Bush Sr., heaven or hell? But before we go to that serious topic, we're going to talk about another even more serious topic, that is money. I need you to go to patreon.com/hindsight. I need you to sign up for a sponsorship. $3, $5, $10 a month is all it takes. And while you're at it, why don't you go to hindsight.com, my author website, and pick up one of my great books. Also, don't forget, I have a podcast now. It's called Books in Hindsight, and I interview some of the greatest and the latest in books and authors. And check it out, I've got some really good looking ones on there for some reason, but go ahead and check out Books in Hindsight. And please comment, like, and subscribe wherever you see my videos or hear my podcasts. All right, now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what is going to be the final tally for George Bush Sr., also known as Poppy, which is really ironic, I guess. And also I want people to understand that the reason that I'm talking about this now is that there are going to be so many documentaries coming out that say the same things that I'm going to say. And I just want to be able to say, ha, I told you so. All right, so let's talk about the reasons that George Bush Sr. might be in the hot place. All right, well, first thing we need to talk about are the sins of the fathers. Now, George Bush's father, George Bush, W. Bush's grandfather, was none other than Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush was actually Senator Bush at one time. Now, how did he make his living? He made his living working for a company called Brown Brothers Harriman. Harriman, if you don't know, built his fortune with the railroads, and then they kind of got into the banking thing with J.P. Morgan's Citibank. So, during World War II, when Adolf Hitler needed to hide assets of a company called Thyssen, and if you get into an elevator anywhere, you're probably going to be riding in a Thyssen elevator. Now, Thyssen was joined up with Krupp, which is a steelworks. So what George Bush's father did was he basically allowed Thyssen and Krupp to move their money around so that the U.S. government couldn't find it, and they continued banking with these companies during the entire length of World War II. And in a survivors of Auschwitz trial, they came out and said that Prescott Bush should have been tried as a Nazi collaborator in the extinction of the Jews. All right, so now that's the sins of the fathers, and as we see in the Bible, it says that the iniquities of the fathers will be visited upon the third and fourth generations. So, by proxy, there's one strike against George Bush. But now let's just look at George Bush And let's look at his involvement in what is known as the Skull and Bones. Now, he went to Yale like his father, and he was a member of the Skull and Bones, a secret organization which actually falls right into the theme of this channel, which is quote unquote Mormons, Freemasons, and extraterrestrials. Now, what is his involvement with the secret society, and how would that end up with him being sent to another place? Well, the Lord doesn't like secret societies, and if you look at the book called the Book of Mormon, or the Doctrine and Covenants, which are both Latter-day Saint scriptures, you will see many references to these secret societies that existed in the New World and obviously still exist today, as you see in the Comey, Clinton, conspiracy government and media and everybody else. So here he is involved in the secret society, and he graduates from Yale. And then what is the next thing we hear about George Bush as far as history goes? Well, there is the Kennedy assassination. And now there are many people coming out and saying that he was actually present as a CIA employee at the Kennedy assassination at Dealey Plaza. All right, so regardless of whether he was there or not, he was in the CIA, and as soon as Kennedy was assassinated, the troop involvement to Vietnam went up exponentially, and by a year later, by 1965, about 2 years later, we had over 100,000 troops and moving much higher into Vietnam, which meant that the people that Bush really worked for, which were the stockholders of General Motors, Ford, Boeing, all the arms manufacturers, their stock, as well as the Bush stock, went right through the ceiling. Okay, so here we have a CIA guy and the Kennedy assassination, Vietnam takes off, and then we just kind of don't hear much about Bush. But during that time, Bush is involved in the CIA. He's out doing things, and what things are happening? Well, the United States, starting with Vietnam, is starting to basically consolidate the drugs in the world. They got the heroin from Asia, and then they wanted to get after the cocaine and the marijuana in Mexico. So where is old Poppy now? Well, Poppy, I don't know, because I don't have access to CIA personnel records, but most likely he's down in Central America making ties to the right kinds of folks. And then suddenly in 1980, he is President Reagan's running mate, right? Right out of the CIA, already sheep dipped and everything. Going to have a CIA guy as the head of, or the vice president, in case Reagan gets shot. The CIA is going to be running the country. All right, so now he's George Bush has gone around and obviously made the right kind of deals, and now he's the vice president. Then, guess what? While he's the vice president, there's the Iran-Contra scandal, and what it turns out is that he is he's involved in this operation to send guns to Nicaragua because they wanted to overthrow the communists there, and they were sending guns there, but how to pay for the guns when the Congress cut them off? Well, why not sell arms to the Iranians, because we're backing their enemies, the Iraqis, right? So Bush does all this stuff about, and if you don't think he's involved, in 1986 or 87, when a guy named Eugene Hasenfuss was shot down over Nicaragua in a cargo plane, the first place he called was the White House and asked for George Bush. All right, and then if you go into South Central Los Angeles, you'll see that the whole cocaine thing was just a way to get African Americans addicted to crack and put them in prison. And this is exactly what their big cocaine drug guy, the big importer, Barry Seal, even said, except not in those same words. All right, so we have cocaine involvement. He's selling drugs, or allegedly involved in selling drugs, and arms deals with Iran. And as soon as Jimmy Carter lost the presidency and Reagan won, well, immediately the Iranians release the hostages. Okay, so he made a deal for arms with that as well, brokered through the Israelis. All right, so then in 1988, Bush becomes what? He becomes the president. And during his presidency, one of his underlings, one of the people that he has groomed as a leader, is none other than Saddam Hussein. And the Bush administration spent a lot of money arming him by selling tractors that could be converted, pesticides that could be converted, and lots of cash paid for by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and guaranteed in loans by the American taxpayer. So they built up his army, and then we allowed him to go into Kuwait because Kuwait was calling in their loans for the war against Iran. So he invaded Kuwait, and then the Gulf War started. So then a bunch more Iraqis were killed, and then this perpetual war that continues even today began. So then his not his last highlight, but the second to the last highlight was, of course, 9/11. But in this operation, it's not just old George this time. It's the son who has somehow become elected the president, and it's also certain members of his family that have ties to people who own things in the World Trade Center, which becomes demolished by demolitions in this fake attack, which was carried out by who? Well, it's coming out very quickly that it was all just a CIA operation. And if you don't believe me, the court has ruled that certain documents must be allowed and that certain testimony must be allowed, and they're going to re-examine 9/11. So we're going to find out more about the Bushes. Okay, so here's the Bush family involvement in 9/11. And then the last thing, the coup de grace, if you will call it that, is that old Poppy is, I guess he's an ass grabber, and he's going around grabbing women's butts while they're having photos taken. So I don't know how well this sits with old George, or what is her, Mrs. Bush, but that is the scorecard there. Now, I left out the fact that when he was elected president, he lied. He said, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and then he raised taxes, and then he took us to a war, which was basically just another way to get his arms dealer friends rich. And after 9/11, his arms dealer friends in the Carlyle Group, which also happened to include the Bin Laden family and the Saudi royal family, they made a killing because the Carlyle Group owns all of the weapon stocks. Okay, so in the final tally, I'm not going to say anything. This is just the evidence. And you can look at their heritage, their legacy, and you can judge for yourself as to what the ultimate fate of former President George Bush was. I'm not going to say anything. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comments below and tell me what you think. Now, I know people are going to be on one side or the other, and I am a Republican, and I support the Republican ideals, but George Bush was not a Republican. He did not support any Republican ideals unless that was drug running and whatever else. So all I'm going to say is that early in life, George Bush chose to be a member of the Skull and Bones. Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. He's a member of the Skull and Bones now. This is Deceptions of the Ages News. We'll see you next time.